Good morning. Well, I became very frustrated this morning, and it brought back to me the reason why I had to go to YouTube rather than any other ways I had used before to get my opinion out. This morning in my newspaper, the Arizona Republic, Montini comes out with women hurt by the attack, Planned Parenthood attack, and no, that's kind of a misleading headline. It is actually women have attacked, or people have attacked Planned Parenthood, and women are hurt by it. Well, then we got here in the letter section, attack on Planned Parenthood, just sad. Well, I'm a pro-life, I've been pro-life since 1973, Roe versus Wade. I'm a Democrat, and believe me, I wrote many letters to this newspaper. By the way, it was bought by Gannett, but it was owned by one publisher before that, who founded it, and he had it for years. Well, needless to say, I did not get in this paper. No matter how many letters I wrote, they never printed. Well, today I got so agitated that I went and looked up how I could write them a letter. I wrote them a letter. I couldn't get it to take. So frustrated. And I thought, and then the chances of them printing it is, since I'm opposing all of this, is not good. So, what I was trying to get across to the paper, which they don't really care about and don't look into, is Planned Parenthood has a history in this state of opposing every restriction that anybody could come up with, either if they didn't have a Democrat governor like Janet Napolitano to veto it, then they would go to the courts, tie it up in the courts. So eventually a judge would rule that this restriction was somehow unconstitutional or wasn't, a defiance of the law. So it would disappear. And one of these restrictions was trying to get a notarized permission from a parent for an underage, that means 15 and younger, to have an abortion.
Wait a second now. I come back from the Midwest, all right?
Yes.
Underage is anything less than 18. What is this 15-year-old stuff you're talking about?
Well, it was any 16, but anyway, it was to
Is there a different law out here that I don't understand about?
Well, my understanding was that at 16 you no longer have to have permission from a parent, but under 16 you would have to have permission. Well, and you would think that they could get that restriction passed, but it seemed like that any restriction was a threat for Planned Parenthood. And although they put out the idea that all they're there for is just to help women in many different ways, why? Why then does Planned Parenthood have a history of going after restrictions, and has done for years in this state? And Gloria Felt was the CEO of this state, and then she went on to become national. And then the national head for a while.
Of what?
Of Planned Parenthood. And then Brian Howard became the head of Planned Parenthood after she left here, and he still is. So he's been in there a number of years.
Why? Why isn't there a female there?
Well, who knows? But anyway,
That doesn't make any sense to me.
came up with it's before the paper was sold to Gannett. It was President Bush was still was in the presidency in his first 30 years before the war. Before the war is the 9/11.
Which President Bush is on?
And I know I'm talking about the son.
The W?
And yes, and what?
W?
Yes. And anyway, he put in that every teenager should have an abortion if they get pregnant. Otherwise, it's going to ruin their lives.
I never heard that before.
And then he said that.
Where do you hear this stuff?
I read it in the paper that Brian Howard wrote, who is still the CEO of Planned Parenthood in Arizona.
No, wait a minute. Was this today?
And no, he did it when Bush was in the presidency. And then he also said, and underage teens should not have to tell their parents because they may be zealots who don't believe in it. Now this was printed in the paper. This is what the Arizona Republic, the people who bought it inherited. That was their history.
Did you have copies?
And also many letters were printed by the state's leading abortionists.
Do you have copies of
Dr.
that
Finley.
you could show people?
No, I didn't think it was necessary, but it would be very easy to go back. I wrote a letter to President Bush about it,
Which
saying,
one?
the son.
W.
I went ahead and I was just so indignant over this kind of thing in our paper. And of course, the Arizona Republic was taken over by liberals who went in the same direction as all the big newspapers. How they got under control of the liberals. Now that's so much control, so much that they could go ahead, accept and promote. They didn't just accept that abortion was legal. They promoted it. For years they printed editorials explaining to women the virtues of legalized abortion, what was the advantages of having that. And even though they might outrage a lot of the populace who are religious, the Christian churches, the Catholics, Catholic Christian, Mormon Christian, the Mormons claim to be Christian, whether the other people think they are or not. Not abortion, but they didn't mind just running right over the top of them and printing the newspaper, which is supposed to be objective and reflect, I would think, people's everybody's life experience. I would think that a newspaper should be able to take the pulse, you might say, of the people and get an objective view. But if they don't ever take the pulse of some of the people they reject,
What do you mean take
they're
the
not
pulse?
going to get an objective view. They're going to be, it's
What
too
does take
easy.
the pulse mean? As if you're still alive? Oh my God, I'm dead.
But anyway, this morning
Oh,
when
I
any pro-life activist has got a lot that they have experienced through Planned. That's why they target Planned Parenthood abortion clinics, because of the emphasis on abortion that Planned Parenthood has done themselves through trying to promote it, they have across the land, but now when they're in trouble with it, they don't want to acknowledge that that is what had happened. That they had CEOs like Brian Howard, who wrote this in the paper, promoting his idea on abortion. For example, teenagers should all get abortions.
Never heard that one before.
Well,
Sorry, never heard it.
and so now naturally they want to distance themselves from any of the opinions and any of the behaviors that cause them trouble. So they put out this statistic saying only 3% of all their goes to abortion. of their income comes, and Planned Parenthood, but anyway, activists, the ones I'm connected to, Catholic, say this is probably more like 40%, which makes more sense because of how they have fought every abortion restriction that come along. Planned Parenthood has fought it out and above any other abortion providers. So that's why they have got targeted. That's why they've got the animosity of pro-life activists, because they have continually fought what they do. And so naturally they're going to be regarded as somebody to target. And of course, Planned Parenthood has reacted by trying to cover their past history up, as far as I'm concerned. Trying to act innocent of doing all this. But it's a matter of history. You can find out from legislators who backed, who opposed them, who took them to court time and time again. Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood took them to court. Tied it up in court. 3 times they passed the restriction that any person, any teenager under 16 had to have parental notarized consent. 3 times Planned Parenthood
Now, where did you read
tied
that?
this up in
Where
court.
did you read that?
Because I've been reading
I said
that
where?
for years. I read every time. I just read a recent. They tied
On the
it up.
computer?
3, yes, internet, everywhere. If you connect up to Planned Parenthood, if you connect up to pro-life activists, they are aware of this history. But the media doesn't print it because they like to make Planned Parenthood. Now they try to turn them into martyrs. Oh, that's the last thing they should think of them as martyrs. A CEO who says all teenagers should have an abortion, he said it once. I'm sure he hasn't changed his mind very much since Planned Parenthood is still very active in this state, working against abortion restriction. They had that restriction tied up in court again. And finally, not too long ago, they said they weren't going to fight it. They couldn't afford to. Poor Planned Parenthood is on the ropes. They are under fire, and they weren't going to be able to fight it in court any longer. So at last, after all these years of trying, they have got it into law, finally, that teenagers have to have a notarized permission from a parent. Is that so much to ask when something as serious as taking a life is involved with a teenager? Is that something that shouldn't be asked? You would think so. So if Planned Parenthood concerned themselves with fighting every single abortion restriction for years, and then they get the reputation of being a lot more for abortion than they will admit. That is how they got their reputation. And if the paper is not objective enough to look into history and interpret it, can I say, I'm sure they're not going to print a letter from me to this meeting. So this is why I came down here. I said, I must get some of the other facts out to the public about Planned Parenthood. Why Planned Parenthood has been under fire from pro-life activists. That's why. They're too much for abortion. They're too much selling abortion. This is what you get into when you have abortion for a solution. You get people promoting it, trying to profit off from it. What else do you expect? The people who go put up with this law, they're the ones to blame too. We all are to blame until we change the law. And that's going to take a lot, because just the other day in this paper, some man wrote in and said, well, after Arizona passed a restriction of 20 weeks, after that, no abortion. 20 weeks along, you don't get an abortion. in Arizona anymore. It's into law. And he said, well, all that will happen is all those kids will be born into poverty and we'll have to take care of it. The taxpayers. Oh. Huh. Well, it looks like we're going to have to educate young parents better about how to take care of their children instead of opting for abortion, which is not a humane solution. If you believe in a spirit, you believe in life. Abortion
That's a
is
1 minute
against
warning.
every single belief in the spirit that you could possibly imagine. So this is what we're up against. And that's my say on Planned Parenthood. Today, oh boy,